Hello champions, welcome to Primus Gaming. I'm your host Manu and today we talk about player housing. So they did it. They finally did it. Took them only 20 years, but they did it. So yada yada yada, the stream was pretty interesting, all that, nothing important. And then they dropped the player housing bomb. At first I was really excited, like many of you I bet. After I took some time, I kind of pondered, what I just witnessed. And after I read some opinions in trade chat, in guild chat, on Reddit, all those sources that you really should trust, I kind of sat down, and figured I'm not really sure if I have reason to be excited just yet. Because there's a whole bunch of stuff that could go really wrong. So I thought about the entire player housing idea and figured it's a pretty old thing by now. And, people have been crying out to get player housing for like 11 years by now. Player housing really was a popular thing around 2014. That's when player housing came to a lot of different games like Rift and Wildstar. That's also when the Garrison was released in World of Warcraft, and people had kind of mistaken it for an excuse for player housing, and we all remember how that went. And somewhat later, around 2017 or so, a player housing was a thing in ESO as well, and eventually it was a very common feature in MMOs except for World of Warcraft. When I did spend some time thinking about the entire player housing idea, I was kind of getting into a too little, too late kind of situation, to be honest with you. I thought like, okay, it's been 11 years and by now I really wasn't even considering player housing anymore. I wasn't, thinking about how it would work, and I also wasn't wishing for it anymore. It completely fell off my radar. And now they made a big move, and put it on the roadmap for around winter 2025, which is, somewhat more than a year from now. I think that gives us a lot of reason, to speculate, to kind of talk about what we would, wish for player housing, what we want to see, and how it should work and everything. In a developer interview, Ian Hazzikostas also said the team wanted to end Warcraft Direct on player housing to start conversations and discussions, listen to what people want to see most from it. They probably have a rough idea. They would probably have enough stuff that they could put in, and it would probably be quite interesting and pretty cool, but I believe they don't really have a full picture of what the player base actually, want to see, and how could they, of course. So player feedback is always welcome. It's a good thing that they ask for it, and I think this is a pretty good thing. Now, I sat down and made a couple of notes about what player housing should not entail. It's pretty rough, to be honest, to really say what it needs in order to be good, but I definitely have an idea of what it doesn't need, because then it would go downhill pretty damn quick. And we don't want that, do we? So in the entire idea of player housing is, of course, like many other people already said, you want to show off some trophies, you want to make it very you, so it should represent what you really enjoy, and it should look very cool, and you want to show it off to your friends or whatever. There's a whole lot of potential for it to be good, but there's also a whole lot of potential for it to be bad. So I'm gonna go over my negative points that I do not want to see when it comes to player housing, and I really hope they are not going to implement things this way. Let's see what we have. So first off, the most obvious, most immediate thing in my opinion is including any kind of RL money in order to, kind of pimp your house. It would be really bad for the game if you needed some sort of currency that is linked to your real life money in order to make the house more convenient or much more impressive, or much bigger, whatever. So I think that's something that they should really not do. My second point would be making the management overly complex. I've seen some housing mechanics in other games, and sometimes it really is a bit of a learning curve, and I think it would be really bad if you had to kind of sit down forever in order to kind of learn how to place the furniture, how to turn a couch, or how to change a wallpaper, stuff like that. Another point would be if you had to pay rent for this house with a lot of gold, that it's probably pretty hard to come by for many people. Now, there's an argument to be made that, paying rent is very common in the real world, but obviously we're not playing World of Warcraft in order to immerse ourselves in a second real world. We want to immerse ourselves in a world that is a fantasy world where we feel at ease and comfortable. When we do the player housing thing, we want to relax and calm down, and we do not want to worry about if you have enough gold this month to pay the rent, to some NPC or something. And if you don't pay, then you're going to lose the house. So that would be really extremely bad. And just please don't do this. Then there's the idea of, paying for the property. So this is something that you might have seen in other games as well. And there's an argument to be made that, the entire housing plot should not come for free entirely. However, if the plot costs so much gold or, any other new currency, whatever, that you have to play a lot of hours or maybe even weeks, to even afford the plot, then it would immediately defeat the entire point of the entire housing system. And I think many players, wouldn't even touch it, because I think at this point people, will not care enough in order to, sacrifice or, a large portion of their gold in order to buy a plot for the house and then put even more gold into decorations and everything. Then my next point to avoid would be make it too much of a time sink. I don't believe that it would be a good idea to make player housing too much of a time sink when it comes to important things connected to player housing, because we don't know what they will implement and if the housing system will be important to the rest of your gaming experience in some way. And if you had to spend a lot of time in order to make this whole thing, work properly, then it would again defeat the entire point, and it would not be relaxing and, pleasant anymore, but rather it would be a chore that you don't want to do, and therefore you wouldn't probably touch it anymore unless you had to, and then it would be just a pesky, annoying thing to do, to be honest. Next on the list, we have the point making decorations too expensive. Now, let's say there was a shop, may it be, an NPC shop in-game or whatever, or, it comes from other professions or whatever sources they come up with, and the decorations would be extremely expensive and grindy to get, even if it's only for very luxurious or fancy looking decorations. Then it would still be something that, would kind of create some sort of elitism, kind of a clique, when a group of people that kind of show off their fancy stuff, when other people who don't have the time or the resources, to dedicate to this system would be kind of cast out, and not be part of the gang, essentially. That would be a very bad thing, in my opinion, because it would create some sort of elitism around something that is purely cosmetic, which is already the case for some other systems, like mounts and, transmogs and everything. And yes, you could always say those people that, dedicate more time to the game should be rewarded more, etc., etc. But I'm not with you. I'm never with anyone this type of argument right now, not for something this purely cosmetic that is kind of just invented for pleasure and relaxation. But we're not talking about anything competitive here. We're not talking about performance of any kind. We're just talking about something that is supposed to look pretty and make people comfortable and make other people comfortable, and it's just there to be nice and and fun. And if you create another mosh pit of elitism, then it would be quite bad, and I don't feel like I have to explain this too much any longer. So next on the list is quality of life. I believe that housing has the potential to be implemented with a lot of quality of life elements, namely a mailbox, a transmogrifier, perhaps crafting tables of all the professions that you use, and perhaps even professions that you don't use. Perhaps you have an NPC or something that does, some other profession stuff that you do not have equipped, then you could put a fishing pond in there and, some other things. And I believe that would be a very bad thing, because putting too much quality of life into housing would automatically mean that people wouldn't leave their house as much, and thereby the world would feel less populated. The player population is a big part of the visual presentation and of the atmosphere. And if you take that away by putting people in their houses with no incentive to just hang outside in the cities and in the small hubs and everything, then again, that would be very bad for the overall gaming experience, in my opinion. And it would probably cause a lot of people to feel bored whenever they are in the main cities. At the very least, being in the main cities would feel a little bland and a little stale, maybe, and a feeling of emptiness. And we don't really want that. Another very important point that makes me kind of concerned about player housing would be making your house a gold sink. So if you had to buy the house and it would cost you, an enormous amount of gold that, the average player couldn't afford, that would exclude like more than half the player base automatically. I kind of don't believe that they would go down this route, but I do have some worries that it, will come in some other form. I will get into that in a minute. We really, shouldn't be doing this because, having decorations being super expensive or having extra rooms or extra levels or, bigger houses, whatever, being a gold sink. And if you have like some exclusive house that costs like $500,000 gold or whatever, it would make me immediately just turn around and say, okay, housing is not my thing. And, I wouldn't even try the entire thing out. So I really hope they won't be doing something like this because it's kind of game breaking, to be honest. Okay, so the next point, and it would be a big mistake if they did this, in my opinion, if everybody could get a very small and kind of a shabby house for free, and then you deck it out with all the stuff that you can, and then after a while you really start feeling kind of a pressure or kind of a thing that you need to go bigger, and then make all of the additional stuff and all the bigger stuff that you can buy much more expensive, so much so that people would get the feeling of having to play the game in order to afford their house, even if it's just for one house. I'm going to buy a new house and it cost me like 20,000 gold, 50,000 gold, or $500,000 gold, whatever. Like, I am aware that there are a lot of people with a lot of gold, and some of them wouldn't even think twice. If it costs like 40,000 gold, then they're gonna then they are going to spend this amount of gold, and they make it back in like 5 minutes, because everybody is some secret gold guru nowadays. But in reality, most of us are not, and most of us do not want to lose a large amount of gold, or some of us, can't even make this amount of gold because they don't have the time or they don't have, the energy or whatever. And people shouldn't be excluded for not being goblins, essentially. And this is my top point and the top mistake that they could do. Just reeling people in, saying, here's player housing for you. It doesn't cost nothing. But if you want to have something bigger or better, then it's going to cost you, and it's going to cost you a lot. That would be a super bad move, and I really hope they don't do it like this. As a side note, I don't believe you're going to walk around and going to, just pick your house and put it, wherever you want to. I've heard some people ruminating about they're going to want, a house in this district, in Stormwind, in a trade district, in the cathedral district, or whatever. I would probably go for Lakeshire because Lakeshire is great. But I don't believe it's going to work like that. I think the housing system will actually work like where you have like one instance where probably everybody is going, somewhat similar like, in some other games. They are probably going to start off with one place for each faction. Let's say one house is going to be in Durotar somewhere, and the other house is going to be around Stormwind somewhere or whatever. And then later on, there will be a place for Ironforge, and there will be a place for Silvermoon, and so on and so forth. That's what I think is going to happen. And yeah, I'm not sure, of course, how they're going to do it, but those are my 2 cents on this topic, and I just didn't want to leave it untouched, because I think this is pretty much a hot button topic right now. And I do believe there's a lot of potential for discussions. And I know a whole lot of people are already looking forward to winter next year when housing will be around the corner. And I really hope the player base is not going to be disappointed. Bottom line for me, I'm not being very excited right now. I'm very cautiously, not even optimistic. I'm just cautious. And, you know, I'm kind of anticipating the entire thing, and I'm kind of looking forward to it. But at the same time, I'm extremely worried because I think there are like a million things that they could F up big here. And I really hope this is not going to be the case, but I'm still very cautious about it. What do you think? What is your opinion on the matter? Do you think they are going to F it up, or are you looking forward to it, or do you have a lot of ideas what they should implement? Do you feel like this should be connected to, you know, some sort of performance or some sort of effort from the player's part, or is it supposed to be just something that you're getting into and, you know, you can enjoy it to the fullest from the get-go? Please let me know what you think. And if you made it this far into the video, first of all, thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for listening. If you learned something new, or if you enjoyed the video in some fashion, then I would appreciate a like and a sub a lot. Now you have a wonderful rest of your day, night, morning, or otherwise, and I see you in the next one. Cheers.